what you're doing there.
Okay, what I have already done is I have taken some roving, which is just loose wool, not spun, and I have laid out this roving in shingles. This is merino roving. And you lay it out in thin shingles, and then you go another layer the other direction, and then you continue as many layers as you want. This has 4 layers of roving on it, but I also have done that in advance and made what's called a pre-felt. This pre-felt I cut into strips and I added it on top as the design. So, because I wanted this to be a hollow eyeglass case, I made it so that I have a resist on the inside. The resist is it can be plastic, it can be underlayment, it can be foam, and I brought more roving on this side, more pre-felt, and that is ready to be felted. What I'm doing here is, I've done another one. I have taken, whoopsie daisy, I've taken soapy water and I've just sprinkled it with soapy water, and it's on bubble wrap, and I'm going to agitate it. But I have to get my hands free of this roving first. So,
I'm invading your booth here. I'm standing right next to you, so keep going.
Okay. So then I'm going to roll it up in the bubble wrap, which is going to both protect it and give it some agitation. I'm putting it in a towel just to hold the bubble wrap closed. And then I'm going to agitate it 100 times on all sides. And it's going to start, the barbs of the wool are going to start meshing together. And the more you do this, the stronger it gets. Eventually, you can pull that resist out and you can start doing it on its own, and it will shrink and it will absorb some of these pre-felts, and you can start finishing it. So you have raw, you have in the process, and this isn't quite finished yet. It needs a little bit more twitching and doing it, but you have basically a little eyeglass case. But it's a little bit big still, and it needs to be refined a little bit. This hat was made with a resist. This was the resist for this hat. And it was made exactly the same way. It's 4 layers of gold merino roving. And then it was wet down with that soap. I carefully flipped it, brought my raw edges around, gave it another 4 layers, again put it down, put it on bubble wrap, used my pool noodle, and I rolled it until it was felted enough and strong enough so that I could take it out. I cut the bottom off. This was here. I cut it, I opened it, because this is the brim, this is your head, and this is the lining on the inside. And now it's almost finished. I kept on rolling it until it shrank, and I used my hat blocks to form it, and I have almost this hat. So that's felting.
Can I stop you here?
Yeah.
I got you mid-demonstration. Introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Catherine Stebinger. I'm a member of the Northeast Feltmakers Guild.
Okay, so the Northeast Feltmakers Guild now do you teach people how to do this? What do you do?
The Guild is a group of members ranging from beginners to incredible teachers and experts.
You felting groups, is that what it is?
It's a felting group
Okay.
that has members all over the United States. It started in the Northeast. It's primarily in the Northeast, but it's expanded across the U.S.
Okay.
It's the biggest guild in the U.S. And we have folks in Ireland and Germany, all over the world.
So now, my mom used to do this wet felting thing with hats.
Okay.
And it looked incredibly complicated.
Okay.
But the process, basically, if I'm not mistaken, is you're taking all those little hairs that
Right.
anything a hair has, or
Right.
sheep's wool has, or
Right.
anybody's wool has. It has all of those little fibers along the side,
correct.
and you're locking them together, right?
That's
is that
exactly right. That's exactly right. You're taking all these loose hairs, and with the soap that opens up the barbs, you are working the air out of it and locking those barbs together and making a fabric out of it.
Okay, so this is the same thing that happens to a sweater when you stick it in the dryer.
Absolutely.
And it tumbles it and it agitates it. It locks everything together in a ball, right?
Right, exactly.
So what is the advantage other than you get this, may I touch?
Yes,
please?
absolutely.
Other than you get this beautiful type of thing like this, what's the advantage to felting? Is it any more resistant to wear, or what happens?
It's very resistant. Hats and shoes and boots are water resistant.
Oh my gosh, you get felted boots.
Yes, we have felted boots. Natalia Brasovecka from Cyprus taught us how to make boots, and she's a guild member. So they are water resistant. You can make anything from a vessel to a very filmy scarf.
Okay, so that's extremely light. I did not associate this with felt.
Yes.
I mean, I really would. Well, look at that, both sides. Okay, so now I just watched you put the eyeglass thing together.
Yep.
And you're really starting big. So when you start big with something like that, is it going to shrink?
It shrinks, and part of what you need to do is figure out your shrink ratio when you're making something.
I got to do math? You're telling me I have to do math with this?
Not for everything. I mean, silk scarves are very easy. Her scarves are easy.
You don't do the math.
Wait, this is silk?
This is silk. It's Margolin silk from Uzbekistan that I hand dyed, and then I put the wool fiber, this wool merino, on it.
Okay.
And
so
then felted it.
So this is the silk part, and this is the wool part.
So silk does not shrink, and so it buckles. And I love the ruching effect.
Beautiful,
that it gets.
isn't it?
Whereas this does not have any silk in it, so it didn't ruche.
Right.
You have other kinds.
It grabs the silk.
So the wool works its way through the openings in any kind of fabric that has a little bit of a gap. So you can do it on almost anything. You can kind of see in the light the fibers coming through and sort of hooking the silk onto it.
That's a lovely piece. So how big do you have to start with the silk? Or is there silk this
not
way too?
No, this was only a little bit bigger because there's very little wool on this and not much shrinkage. So whereas this hat is all wool, and I really wanted it to be tight, so I shrank it a lot, as you can see.
So the same thing with these. Do they do a hat like this?
Commercial felted hat.
Yes, it is commercial.
It's the same way. It's made with heat and a press, but it's made in exactly the same way, but with machines. So it's the same thing.
Okay, now I have to tell you, I have this is a crushable hat, theoretically. I'm working on this. This is a Scalia hat, so it is commercial, and I'm trying to see if it will uncrush, right? Because it's a new one.
You should be able to put it in your suitcase and not worry.
I am trying to do that, so I'm on the lookout for a new one.
When you felt a hat and steam it, the steam gives it memory, and it's uncrushable.
But this is also steam.
So
it could be stiffened a little.
So the crushable part is, assuming it's the wire, and if it can pop back out again, this will do the
crown. The crown has to be able to flatten too.
Right. So this is totally crushable because it has memory. It's been steamed. It has memory. There's no wire in it.
It has memory. I like that. I like that.
So this one is about 90% done. It needs a little bit more shrinking and to be steamed and smoothed out and really, made smooth.
Okay, now tell me, this is a hat, and they're all individual to people's heads.
Yes.
So is felt something where you have to get the general ballpark, or you want it to dry in your head afterwards because then it goes to the right side, right?
I use hat blocks, and I have different size hat blocks for different size hats, and so people have to try their hats on. I don't make them all for me because I make them for other people as well, so I have different sizes. There are some hats that are meant to be like a bucket hat, and they fit pretty much anyone.
But that's something where you could really sort of tailor your hat to your own head, right?
You absolutely can. You theoretically could. I could make this on my head and have wet hair.
Now, what if it's still a little too big? Is there any way to shrink it more, or once you get to certain stages, stop shrinking?
Absolutely. So you take it and you put it back on your mat. Let's take this out of the way.
Yeah, you guys have quite a process here.
Yep. And if you need to shrink it this way, you continue the process. And if it's really cold, like in here, you would add some hot water to it.
Okay, so you're just locking them more, right?
And I'm really focusing on this part here. I'm rolling it on that part right there because I had before, the whole thing had been shrunken before. But let's say I am concentrating just on this area.
Don't ruin your hat for me.
I'm not ruining your hat.
Okay.
I'm not. I won't. And then you put it back on your block and you reshape it however you want to shape it.
So in a way, there's a little give for beginners.
There's a lot of give. It's like clay. At a certain point, there's a lot. And if you made it too small, you can put it in a colander with some steam and you can stretch it out.
So at what point does it become a hat that I know that it can get wet when it rains and I can beat it up and it's not going to change shape?
When you feel that it's stiff, when it's stiff.
Yep.
This, you can feel it's soft. You can feel the softness in something where it doesn't, it's not
that's
yet.
sopping wet. Look at that.
It is.
Yes.
It's sopping wet. So there was a piece of pre-felt here. You can see that something like this is not going to hold the water. But you can feel
very
something like
light.
this, if you popped water on it, it would roll right off.
Okay.
Now, if I stepped in a puddle and just stayed in that puddle, it would eventually absorb it.
Isn't that pretty?
But,
okay, so now we've done the hats for a minute. I've been kind of eyeing your jacket.
okay, which
Yes.
is very old at this point.
Well, it's gorgeous.
Thank
So
you.
tell me how one does something like this. Are you felting sheets and then sewing them together? or what?
there's
That's
no
one piece,
sewing.
isn't it?
It's one piece, except for the fact that I split it down the middle and put a zipper. It's one piece,
Wow.
which is quite worn out at this point because it's 5 years old.
If you had
Well-
not, I would assume you made
Okay.
it to.
So
Wow.
you have the shape. I measured myself, and then I figured out what my shrink ratio was going to be, which is how much it was going to shrink. I made a sample. I then I made a resist, exactly this shape, by expanding it with my shrink ratio. And it was huge. It was about the size of this rectangle, this square. And I put it on a big table. It's
Your
huge.
shirt is made out of. Is that? No, that's a sweater.
Yeah, this is sweater.
But look how well that goes. I mean, that's
Yeah.
beautiful.
I know. I always match,
I'm still. I can't get. You and me both. I've got.
and I wear dark clothes, but I work in color.
Well, because you kind of have to. I mean, this is a pretty messy process, right? Or at least you're
Well,
wet.
it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't
At
have
the
to
beginning,
be.
when I first started felting, there was water everywhere.
We made those rugs without too much
Yeah.
mess.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it's huge. You need a big table, or you have to roll it, or you roll up one part and then work on another part. But it's all rolled together,
Right.
sort of like I don't know, like a burrito or something. You make a burrito.
You work in sections then with length.
You
but-
roll up one part and hold it against the table.
Nice and active. This is a good thing for arthritis, right? I mean,
Yeah, you just have to be careful when you're rolling with your body and shoulders and just roll it.
Right.
But yeah,
And I
mean,
usually have blocks under the table that bring it to
Rise.
this height.
Bring it up
Risers.
high.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we talked about hats and we've talked about jackets. Tell me about this.
The
'Cause
garland?
yeah, I mean, you have all
So-
kinds of doohickeys that you're making.
So-
Have you ever heard of Moss Hollow?
No.
Moss Hollow? We were at Lambtown and we got to meet a gal that makes, I said, I can't say the word that she says, makes weird stuff. And it's things like this that she makes. She just makes really interesting creatures and hats and all kinds of things.
Well-
Tell me how you can make this kind of business.
Well, Nancy's doing it right here. So it's the same exact thing. You lay out your roving in the shape that you want it to be. She has multiple resists. Like she starts out with bigger resists and then puts some fiber on it. And then she leaves a hole in the center and then puts fiber and then goes to the next one, puts fiber. And so you have this multi-layered thing that's held together and felted together by the center, and each piece itself gets felted together.
Who came up with this stuff? I mean, seriously.
A lot of very smart women.
But you could have done this really in the Middle Ages, or
Well,
you know.
this is a very, very old craft.
Is
I
it?
mean, the yurts were felted, the Russian boots were felted. I mean, this is a very, very old craft.
Water runs off. It can be folded.
I mean,
fantastic.
You have the Kyrgyzstan rugs. You have, they take these huge, heavy rugs and put them around poles, and they hook them up to like oxen or horses, and they drag them along, wrap them and drag them along the fields and felt them. They're huge rugs.
The men make them.
The men, yeah. So, it's a very, very old craft. And there are people like in Hungary, there are some amazing, and then in Cyprus now, Ukraine and Cyprus, Natalia Rashovetska in Cyprus, Judith Polk in Hungary. I mean, there are so many artists and teachers around now. They're amazing.
Okay, so you talk about the different regions that this might apply. If you have different animals, different coats, like if I felt a Navajo churro sheep, that thing's gonna be.
It's going to felt differently. So whenever
Yes.
you make something with a new wool, you make a sample of it to see what the shrink ratio is and how it's going to react.
Because it might grab differently, might be sturdier, might not be as
It
elastic, right?
might not shrink as well.
Okay.
Sibel, who was just here, made a diorama of, she got wool from like maybe 30 or 40 different sheep and made little cups of each one of them to see how they all felt it and put it on a board. I wish we had it here. But every sheep's wool will, and different times of year and different parts of the sheep will felt differently.
Well, these are just absolutely lovely. I mean, the garland
Yeah.
and the bowls and the hats. I'm so glad we got to talk to you guys
Well,
because
thank you for
this is
stopping
just
by.
such a lovely craft.
Northeast Feltmakers Guild, we've got it all.
So where do they contact you?
You can find us. We are all over the place, and the best way to do
Okay.
it is to go on the website.
Okay,
to-
www.northeastfeltmakers.com.